Another week has gone by, which means there's 5 more albums that we need to try to add to your CD collection. It's been another kind of slow weekend for heavy metal, with releases dropping here and there that are not as well known, or perhaps ones that maybe you would sort of pass by because you were unsure of the lineup that was involved. We're going to talk about a couple of those, while also diving a little bit deeper into the past, going back to January to talk about an album that we missed. So let's get that CD collection boistered up by 5. There's 5 recently released albums that you need to check out. And the first one that we're going to speak about is The Conqueror's Oath by the band Visigoth. Now, let's be real here. Many like to claim that new wave of British heavy metal is a dead art that is only handled by its classic bands. And we just spoke about Saxon recently, so you can kind of understand where that's coming from. Bands such as Saxon or Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, ones that are forerunners of the sound, are the ones that you traditionally associate with this. You don't hear about a lot of newer bands adopting this part of the sound, mostly because we've maybe evolved as a genre into more complex terms. Power metal, heavy metal, thrash metal, whatever. Well, Visigoth give us a taste of speed, a little bit of what's become known as power metal, but has a nice hunk of the new wave of British heavy metal within them as well. All of these collective influences make for a very enjoyable album that has great shredding from their axemen, solid and very reliable percussion, and a voice that feels very apt for the 1980s scene. So far so good. The fury of a track such as Steel and Silver or Warrior Queen, for example, give us a very healthy dose of the battlefield, and the surrounding metal accents within it give it a nice touch of the 1980s roots that we are speaking about also. The guitar tone shrieks with a bit of fuzz and some reverb, and the whole album actually has this sort of production quality that has a little bit of artificial age to it. So it's almost like they are dating the material within that new wave of British heavy metal heyday in the 1980s to give it a little bit of added charm. It's sort of one half Burning Star and maybe one part Blind Guardian, which is accented very nicely within the group vocals that you find in the title track, The Conqueror's Oath. We do get a thoughtful 7-minute track in the middle of this album with a great development that could easily belong on a Halford solo album. And the song that I'm thinking about from the Halford solo affairs that this feels very comparable to is a track such as Silent Scream. So Visigoth's resurrection of the past has a lot of real vigor and a lot of real purpose behind it. And instead of this feeling very forced or very hokey, it has character and it has uniqueness. And that's what makes The Conqueror's Oath such a smooth and nice listen. Scope it out. Up next, we have the Atlas Moth with Coma Noir. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think that stoner and sludge metal is becoming like a weirdly overarching term used to explain hybrid metal? You know, it's something where if it has that thick-based sound and is a little bit uncharacteristic, you know, and it's one that does sometimes boast some hypnotic riffs, they immediately thrust it right into that stoner and sludge metal department. You know, what once was maybe avant-garde or experimental is now deemed within one of these 2 categories. I don't know, evolution's kind of a weird thing. The Atlas Moth, they do have this designation, and so they do fit within this category. And while it is true enough, their sound sometimes feels just a little bit more ambitious than perhaps those terms initially make you, you know, sort of what happens whenever they bounce off of your skull. They make you feel a little certain way. They have, the Atlas Moth does, vocals that shriek like extreme metal elitists, sometimes bordering on black metal shrieks. And they also swirl with calmer cleans, all while a ping-pong match of riffs sort of jostle in the background, hopping from the low-end blitzkrieg to a more precise plucking. Coma Noir will deal the first blow to the new listener. Sludge may have its fair share of extreme vocalists, but this with this bordering on that black metal shrill will certainly feel a little bit like they are sort of outside of the playing field, coloring outside of the lines. The Chaos treks onward, but finds decided consistency with a track such as Galactic Brain, either that or The Streets of Bombay, which both allow compositional growth and offer really addicting guitar work. That's what really nailed me down with these 2 tracks. They're right there in the middle. They're the longer tracks, longer cuts on the album, and they just feel like they are very well comprised and really gave you a lot for your money. The cleans here are very well done, but craft a weird duality that may leave some listeners wishing that the shrieks didn't exist, or vice versa. Some they feeling that maybe the cleans don't need to be there. Furious Gold is a great example of how powerful a song can be with this duality, and what happens whenever it works with a lot of harmony. And along the way, the ride gets bumpy, though, with some inconsistent delivery, but Chloroform is a hazy, smoked-out screamer that has an instrumental I bet Downwish that they manufactured for Phil Anselmo to use. The cleans here are varied and strained, some on delivery, which is actually a nice little added touch, consider with Chloroform, you know, whatever. But the ending to this track is just, why would you do this? It's very perplexing. There's a big, long shriek passage that you get that sort of kills the mood. And for a track that was really becoming one of instant memory, it was a way for it to sort of damage its long-term efforts. The Atlas Moth may not be appreciated by all. I have a feeling this is going to be a sort of come-as-you-come type of band for a lot of folks. They might listen to it once and determine it's not for them, while others will instantly fall in love. But this is definitely an interesting release, and it's one that is not altogether bad whatsoever. So give it a try. Crescent with the Order of Amenti. This is kind of a head-scratcher. This may actually be one of those situations where this album appeals to others a lot more than it applies to me. Crescent is a band that they very much feel like they are giving, or trying to give, Nile a run for their money, or at least just some company in the realm of what could be considered Egyptian metal or pyramid metal. Maybe I would call it grip metal if I cared that much. But they definitely have a lot of similar characteristics. But these gents are from Egypt, so, you know, they have the source material right there literally in front of them. And their black and death metal sound is, well, I think the best word I could use is interesting. They've definitely done their homework, but their second offering gives you little room to breathe. But we encounter an issue with everything feeling just a little bit too similar, especially on the opening half of this album. So you would get a sort of a differing idea every once in a while, but then you have these long passages that feel like they are very static and motionless. They don't go very far. The brutality is sort of meant to keep you in this position where you are sort of at a choke point. You can't really move. You're sort of being pummeled by these riffs endlessly, but it's not going very many places. It's almost as though they are waiting for this a little bit longer than they need to for the next movement or the next part of the song in order to continue. And all that sort of lag time or downtime does make it feel a little bit weak, almost as though they're kind of looking at each other like, okay, that was cool, but now what the hell do we do? That lingering is what causes things to feel like really poorly constructed bridges. So you had maybe a really bad archaeologist that didn't really reinforce it with a lot of structural support. This sadly doesn't get solved by the album's second half, but it does feature the closer, which is entitled In the Name of Osiris, which is probably the album's strongest cut. I guess that's good, considering the last song is the one that does bear the most memory. This is probably the song that they should use as a bit of a, I don't know, a sort of a synthesis point for the next record, to really show that they have the capability to really write very concise and great material, and really try to wrap an album around that. But again, this is very much, it's really subjective to taste. The riffs and compositions do pulverize you and are unrelenting. Those who love that imposition are going to love this release, so I don't want you guys to sleep on this just yet, because I didn't necessarily enjoy it. Others are going to really long for a new Nile album due to the band's added creative spark, while Crescent feels like they're just a little bit lacking. But, here's the really, really exciting part about these guys that I kind of dig. This is only their second album, so a lot of development can happen with these gents. Give this a try if you want, but know that these guys are definitely going to have a lot of spark, and, you know, that any sort of, any sort of reinforcement is going to give them some ideas or some knowledge of what they may want to work on in the future. So, give it a go. Why not? We need to take the Wayback Machine back to January the 19th, where an album was released that perhaps isn't on your radar even to this day, but there are a lot of metal fans that are starting to speak about this record. It's been on the tongues of some folks. This is a Russian band that has the attention of the underground metal elites. This is Arkona, and their album is entitled Kram, I believe. Somebody in Russia is no doubt just cursing the hell out of me for destroying the pronunciation of that, but, you know, Russia's been in the news a lot lately, so I guess what's one more piece of news? Really the piece of news should be this album. This album has been tampering with the ears of men and women of metal everywhere, causing them to listen to this 74-minute-long album of epic folk metal. Well, tamper me again, Daddy, because this freaking rules. We have two big-time epics on the front half of this album that are 17 and 12 minutes long, respectively. I'm not giving you titles because I'm not destroying the language any more than I already have. And really, these are tracks that do Moonsorrow very, very proud. They remind me a lot of how that band is able to make time flow sort of effortlessly and, use every, sort of strange instrument or strange idea that they can in order to build epic tracks that have that folklore sensibility in mind. So it's like telling a massive story that Russians, no doubt, have heard throughout their lifetimes, or something that you would find in a Russian book of folklore. So we get mouth harps and we get other strange instruments that add to this, which is again something that you hear within Moonsorrow. And then the title track, which I believe means temple. I'm thinking that's what that means. Somebody please help me out here. This is one that also continues this majesty and really continues to flow into the second half of this album. These are tracks that are 8 to 9 minutes in length, and really looking backward in their discography, this is very ambitious for the band. This is something where they have sort of taken things to the next level with Kram and really aimed to craft an album that had something that had a little bit more of a big purpose, or a big, just a big sort of overarching concept in mind, and I really liked what they did here. We even got some awesome, very concerto piano style work on the second half. Everything just swirls around, and the wondrous execution, the tremendous self-control, all of this, and even the way in which they're able to juxtapose between the vocals, it all just keeps your attention. It keeps you glued to your headphones, and it keeps you glued to your playback device. If you're in the car, you're going to want to all of a sudden drive somewhere 20 minutes away just so you can complete this listening experience. And no matter what, even if you don't really understand the language, even if you don't kind of know what's going on, everything that goes on, everything that you hear feels and sounds big. This is still an album that I feel that even with this video, even with me talking about, it's going to fly under a ton of radars. Do not let this one fly under yours. This is worth the 74-minute tampering of your ears. Check it out now. We conclude today with Good Tiger and We Will All Be Gone. And this is alternative metal, which should be right in my wheelhouse, considering I like both of those genres individually. But so often whenever we see that in a record, or, it's to describe an album, it's used just to sell records, so acne-clad post-emo teens can say that they're so metal. Well, this is different. Good Tiger can actually claim to be alternative metal. They're an alternative band that has that bite of metal, and they also have the pedigree where if they don't do that, something is very, very wrong. This is a supergroup, in case you didn't know. There's members of Architects, The Faceless, The Safety Fire, and Elliot Coleman, who at one point were sung with Tesseract. Now, whenever we get to the album itself, The Waterlog, The Devil Thinks I'm Sinking, and Float On, they cause some to yell the familiar tag of, it's a post-hardcore band. But this, good try. The composition is very frantic, it's extremely appealing, that's sort of what keeps you gripped. Traditional post-hardcore may feel very boring or benign, it doesn't have a lot of that sort of kinesis, or it all feels the same. There's literally tens of hundreds of wannabes that are out there that are literally copy-pasting the same ideas. Whereas whenever you listen to Good Tiger, something about it just feels a little bit more fresh. It has a little bit more life that's injected to it. It's not like it's aiming to do what those other bands are attempting. The middle of this album, with songs such as Salt of the Earth or Grip Shoes, they really unlock a heaviness that hasn't been heard in alternative for quite some time. So if you go back to the 1990s, the 16 Stone era Bush, and maybe infuse some of the heavier riffs from Thanks a Lot by Third Eye Blind, I know it's a really, really weird connection. You kind of get what you get here, only amp up that sort of heaviness to a different level. So whereas the two former bands I mentioned, Bush and Third Eye Blind, do still have a little bit more of that rock exterior, this one feels like it has a lot more metallic property. So, wow. There's a lot of really heavy metal facelift that's really shown here, with alternative sensibility whenever it comes to the construction, the riff building, and everything like that. This is what it's all about. This is why Good Tiger has a little bit more of a pulse on what heavy alternative should be. Instead of just staying within that copy-paste formulation that we've heard from numerous post-hardcore bands or bands that claim to be post-hardcore, they are not thinking about what the genre is. They are instead considering what the genre could possibly be. And that's what makes Good Tiger good listening. But quite honestly, with the lineup in mind, did you expect this to be bad? Because if I would have known about this lineup before I pressed play, because I just pressed play randomly and found out all this information later, I would have expected this. I would have expected this album to be good, and this album is good. Even if post-hardcore or heavy alternative isn't your idea of good music, you should still scope this out because the pedigree alone makes it worth your while. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, 5 recently released heavy metal albums that you should probably check out, and if you love them, add them to your collection. I have links for you to do so in the comments below, rather than the description box. I apologize. I want your comments in the comment section below. Oy. We have some albums coming out this weekend that we need to get to, but hopefully we will be back next week and talking about more recent releases that you need to scope out. I'm coverkillernation. I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.